Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hey everyone, this is a friendly reminder that we are here for entertainment purposes only. We may not even be that entertaining at times, but this is not medical advice. Talk to your doctor, check with your healthcare professionals before making any lifestyle changes or medicine changes. What we're talking about is our clinical experience and what we've seen. And so if you really want our advice, you can consult us. You can actually consult me as a doctor, or you can consult my guest and get all your questions answered. But we can't give free medical advice because we can't pay our bills with that, but we can help to educate you a bit and allow you to think a little bit. And always reach out to your medical professional before making any lifestyle changes. Thank you. Hey, everyone. This year is flying by. I think every year flies by, but this one has been really quick. We're in August now. I just want to thank our sponsors for bringing all these great episodes. Today is no exception. This is a powerful, important episode. So I just thank you guys, everyone, for listening, everyone who's been supporting us and for listening, for tuning in, because there's so many other things you can listen to. But I would like to thank Keto Mojo. They're my go-to device for checking ketones and glucose levels, and they do a lot of great research. They're really pushing the envelope with some of the science, and also just really helping to support practices like mine and patients like you. And so Keto Mojo, keto-mojo.com, they have great information, great videos online, but it really helps us to track our ketones, and we get excited when they start going up, and kind of realize we have to make some changes when they drop down. So if we want to be in fat burning mode, the best tool we have is Keto Mojo. So I thank them for their support. And also Health Code, Ben Bickman and brother Joel, who from this podcast. They're doing some great stuff. Their nutritional advice is excellent. Their life advice is outstanding, and they're doing just great work. So I'm so honored to have them as a partner in the podcast to bring these stories to you. So Get Health is their website, GETHLTH.com. Met Health is a discount code. Just because me, it's METHEALTH. Doesn't matter if it's capital or not, but just thank you, and please buy stuff from these guys. They really do support us, and they've been the backbone of this podcast. So they keep us going. They keep bringing these stories for you, and they let me just get up here and yammer on or whatever I do here. So thank you. Have a great day and enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. This is an interesting episode. I think it's going to really shock some people, and other people it's going to be painful for, because it's gonna maybe dig into some childhood things and why we fail, why we struggle so much. But I've been really diving into the data. I'm giving a talk for the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners, and so I was really looking at, okay, is it just about low carb? What do we do? And I really want to, I have a PowerPoint, so I'm just going to run through it and kind of read off my notes here, partially practicing for the talk I'm giving. And I just want to give you a cliff note version of this, but I'm going to share my screen. So anyone who's interested in looking on, YouTube or Rumble, probably Rumble, I would prefer. I think it's worthwhile to follow along and just kind of listen. And I want to talk about some patient experiences, personal experiences, and, what I'm seeing clinically. And so I'm going to start out just kind of showing three guys who have had a massive impact on my life and my career, really, in medicine. Number one, Jason Fung. He was the first one that I heard talking about insulin resistance, metabolic disease, and really started opening my eyes, 17 years into practice, that yes, it is possible to get people off medications and maybe even help their moods and life to be better. Next one is stepping up on that principle was Ben Bickman. Ben is amazing PhD doctor at BYU. And he goes, Brian, look, 5 things, right? that you can do to live longer. Number one, don't work 18-hour days and be stressed and tense and run around. Number two, sleep and get enough sleep. As doctors pride ourselves on how many hours we can be deprived of sleep. And so I was thinking about these 5 rules. I'm like, I'm 0 for 2, and I was working in a stressful job, and never had downtime, was always busy, didn't have time for vacations. I would be stressed all the time. And I was like, I knew that wasn't good for me. Number 3, eat real food, and I was already doing low carb and keto stuff at that time. Next, exercise regularly. Next, don't smoke or drink to excess, right? So that impacted me. I started thinking, it's like, wow, what am I doing? I know I'm not doing all those 5 things, and this is going to shorten my life if I don't start making some changes. And then the next guy, Rob Sivas, who's a bariatric surgeon who struggled with food addiction and obesity his entire life. And he gave a talk at one of the low carb USA conferences, and he was talking about dopamine fasting. Basically, he was saying, okay, just sit there for 3 days and write down your thoughts and reflect on life and see what matters and doesn't matter, but turn off all electrical products, no music, no YouTube, none of that kind of stuff, no Twitter. And I was thinking, man, I started feeling myself, like my heart rate was going up and everything. I'm like, man, that's crazy. I couldn't sit there for 3 days and do nothing. I'm always busy. I would be stressed out trying to catch up. And then I thought, well, why can't I do that? So these 3 guys have had a massive influence on me and my practice of medicine and how I'm helping patients now. And really the whole thing of insulin resistance, really what it is our body is trying to make us survive. And we are very resilient if we get out of the way. So what happens is if we're eating too much fat and carbohydrate all the time, our body is trying to get that extra energy out of the bloodstream. And sooner or later, the cells fill up. So once your fat cells are totally full, they say, look, I can't take any more, or I'm going to explode, like a water balloon exploding. And that's the example I use. So your body says, look, I can't do it. So you're going to have to make more fat cells, or you're going to have to get diabetes and pee out that extra sugar. So these are things that Western medicine, we really fail to understand. And we think, oh, your sugar's high, just give you insulin. Well, that makes things worse. Really, it does. It causes all these cells to take up fat and sugar when they really, really don't want to, or they can't anymore. So we're having cells die off, and we're at increased risk of cancer. So what we figured out is, look, the hardest thing to treat is above the neck. It's not the body necessarily. We're dealing with addiction. We're dealing with stress. We're dealing with Pavlov. Like, we smell certain foods and we want to eat that. Depression, loneliness, sadness. And we're questioning, what are we doing here in life? A lot of us are doing that. Now, when I started talking about these things on Low Carb MD, people go, what are you talking about that stuff for? It has nothing to do with low carb. We're here for the nutrition advice. Well, guess what? All these things do affect us. And the more I've studied, the more I look at, and the more I experience with patient interactions, I'm seeing this to be absolutely correct. So the biggest challenge is we throw all this information, book knowledge, tons of people know what to do, but putting it into effect is the problem. So that's why having a counselor or having a health coach or a trainer or people that are just in your corner telling you which way to go, or, hey, you got off track, we're going to help you. And so generally what happens, we get on track and then Easter comes and we go off track, or the in-laws are visiting, or we have a stressful time in our relationship, or there's Halloween candy and you have a bite of cookie or whatever, Thanksgiving, Christmas, holidays. I'm waiting until next year, and we keep kicking it down the road and we never get healthier. So, all this stuff that Ben Bickman was talking about lowers insulin levels, and he's done great work showing that, hey, the higher your insulin is, the more likely you are to have cancer, the more likely you are to have obesity, diabetes, dementia, erectile dysfunction, arthritis, migraines, you name it, all the stuff that I'm treating. So I was like, well, we could throw a pill at each of those problems, or we could look at the insulin problem, which is exactly what Jason Fung was talking about. So as we go through all this stuff, obviously in Western medicine, the big boogeyman, the thing we're scared of is LDL cholesterol, right? That is, like, everyone knows, like, you eat fat, you're going to die of a heart attack. You do Atkins, you're going to be dead. Well, I come across Roseto, Pennsylvania. You can look it up. It's a small town on the eastern side of Pennsylvania, 1,600 people. Why is this of any significance to us? Well, in 1955, the President of the United States, President Eisenhower, had a heart attack. He was also smoking 6 packs a day or so and doing crazy stuff, drinking coffee like crazy and being stressed out and tense and worried and all that. So they said, let's search for this, what's causing the heart disease. Now, there was the Ansel Keys people who said, obviously, eating more fat's causing the problem. And then there was the Youngkin group who said, yeah, we think sugar's the problem. So who was right? As we go through the data, we start finding out these guys in Roseto, they had no fatal heart attacks under the age of 55. And in those above 65 years of age, their all-cause mortality was half anywhere else in the United States. So what do? We'll fly a team out there and we'll figure it out. Then we'll just implement this with the rest of the population. So what was the secret? Were they on statin drugs? No, those weren't in fact invented or FDA approved until 1987. So 1955 would have predated that. Were they all vegans? Nope. Were they replacing their vegetable oil? I mean, their butter with vegetable oil and margarine or some combination thereof? Nope. Blasphemy. They weren't even keto. They weren't even low carb. They were eating Italian food every day. So how can these guys be eating Italian food, having cholesterol being elevated and being overweight, not exercising much different than anyone else? And they have the lowest mortality rate in the United States. There was no difference based on their fat intake, their cholesterol numbers, their obesity levels, cigarette smoking, or serum cholesterol. Was it genetic? Well, guess what? People questioned that. And then they said, well, a lot of these people who left the town and lived in a different town were having heart attacks at the age of 45, but no one in that town was having it. They were all people who left the town and were in different situations, different towns around. So the difference they finally came, their conclusion was rosations, whatever we want to call them, were found to be cohesive and mutually supportive with strong family and community ties. 85% of the people were in some kind of a social group, whether they were going to church, knitting club, bocce ball, doing something where they were engaged in the community. So they because they were Italian immigrants after World War II, which wasn't popular, they were discriminated against. So they decided they had to band together and support each other and stick together. That's a unique concept, isn't it? And so the elderly, so the senior citizens were living with their kids and then their grandkids. So guess what? When the parents wanted to go out to dinner, they say, hey, the grandparents would say, no problem, we got the kids. And they would laugh and play games and have a great time. They would teach the kids their wisdom, and the kids would keep them young, like we get a new puppy to keep our old dogs alive. So they had great civic pride. They took care of each other. And whenever there was a financial or a disaster problem in the world, they would be the first to donate money, time, people, whatever they could to help. Someone's car broke down. They say, take my car for the week. No biggie. Your house burned down. We're going to get the guys together and we'll build you a new house. Whatever it was, they took care of each other. So the question becomes, are stress and sleep important? In our current model, we say, well, no, it's mostly going to be diet, exercise. It's calories in, calories out. The more you eat, the more weight you gain. The more you exercise, the more weight you lose. So I have a patient in my practice who really started getting me thinking about this stuff. 73-year-old guy. I've been taking care of him for 20 years. He's always been between 180 and 182 pounds, even through the COVID lockdowns. So last year I saw him and he was 180 pounds. And again, I've been taking care of him since he retired. He was 53 when we started. Now he's 73. So this year, he's 203 pounds. So in the last year, he's gained 23 pounds. So I asked him, so what changed? He said, well, you're the doctor. Why don't you tell me what changed? So I said, well, let me ask you a few questions. Has your diet changed at all? He said, I'm not a food person. Weight's never been an issue. Never had diabetes or any problem. So my diet's always the same. I'm not a foodie. I just eat the same thing. I'm pretty monotonous on what I eat. How about exercise? Well, exercise hasn't changed. I have the same trainer I've been working out with for the last 18 years. I still do this, twice a week exercise with him and then going for walks and hikes and doing stuff. How about your alcohol intake? Are you drinking margaritas all of a sudden? No change in that. So I'm going through Ben's 5. And I said, well, the only 2 left are sleep and stress levels. And he goes, you got it. I said, well, what about calories in, calories out? Well, he's doing the same exercise and eating the same amount of food for the most part. Well, that doesn't fit that model. How about if it's just genetic? So all of a sudden, when you're 73, you start gaining weight. That doesn't make sense from a genetic perspective. So he says, well, doc, here, let me tell you what happened. Since I was retired, I'm a pilot. I would just fly to Paso Robles, have a couple glasses of wine with my buddies, go out to the ranch, go to the wineries. And then if I felt like going to Texas, I just flew to Texas. I would just look at the schedule and fly my plane over there. He had no financial problem, no wife, no kids, no responsibilities. So this year, what happened? His 99-year-old mom has dementia. So with her dementia, he said, I'm going to come home and take care of her. No problem. She's been a good mom and I want to take good care of her. She wakes up He wakes up 4 times a night to make sure she doesn't have an accident. He makes sure she gets to the bathroom on time. He's stressed out all day watching her, make sure she doesn't leave on the stove. A lot of us can relate to that, going through all these kind of, these life changes. So he goes, yeah, I'm stressed all the time and I'm not sleeping very well. So the good news is, after getting these 23 pounds, after a few weeks of having a caregiver stay the night, 3 nights where he can get sound sleep, he's lost 8 pounds. So he's going the right way. What else? Another one. I have a 52-year-old CDO, just recently changed jobs, and he's been doing low carb keto, doing great, active, changing his life, working on life stress, all that stuff. And so he was doing great until the last 3 months. He's gained 10 pounds. So I said, what happened? Oh, doc, I'm exhausted all the time. I got a new puppy and the puppy's up, has to go to the bathroom, getting up 3 times a night, same thing. So he's taking care of his puppy and he's gaining weight. So, and he's stacking more and he's more hungry. So is sleep important? So I've been looking at the data on this sleep. If you have poor sleep, is associated with poor attention, dementia, Parkinson's, all these kind of things, and performance deficits, an increase in overall mortality and morbidity. So we have more problems associated with increased cardiac risk, including blood pressure elevation, glucose metabolism defects, hormonal regulation, and inflammatory problems, increased risk of future coronary artery disease and diabetes. They took 5,500 men and women, and those sleeping less than 6 hours a night were 66 times more likely, or 66% more likely to have hypertension than those sleeping between 7 and 8 hours. Loss of half a night's sleep results in elevated blood pressure and insulin resistance, even in healthy people. So poor sleep increases sympathetic activation, which is your adrenaline, norepinephrine, all that kind of stuff. And we see the same thing with increased stress levels. So 1 week of sleep deprivation reduction to 50% of normal. So if you normally sleep 8 hours and you start sleeping 4 hours, it caused people to be pessimistic and they didn't want to be around people. They start, 10% increase in risk of being antisocial. Also increase the blood pressure and also endothelial shear forces, which is what causes atherosclerosis. Increased inflammatory markers, which we don't want chronic inflammation. We've associated that with all kinds of stuff. Increased catecholamines, interleukin-6, which is associated with cancer, and tumor necrosis factor alpha, which again is associated with cancer risk, and increased coagulatory factors. Well, coagulation is not very good. It's good when you're bleeding to death, but if you're coagulated, your blood wants to coagulate all the time. That's what we call strokes and heart attacks. That's the mechanism. It also slows glucose metabolism, so your sugars go up. If a diabetic is stressed and not sleeping, sugars go up, stress hormones go up, everything gets screwed up. Then you have an increase of hunger hormones, ghrelin, and a decrease in satiety hormones, leptin. Why is this interesting? Because I called this when I was in residency. I told my wife, look, when I'm on call all night in the ICU, the next day, I can't stop eating. I'm starving all day. And all my friends are doing the same thing. I look around and everyone's eating all day. But when we're rested and we're doing other stuff, we're not eating all day. It has to be something with the hunger center. And it has been shown to be true. Also, sleep deprivation alters growth hormone levels, testosterone, GLP-1, which is this fancy drug that we're shooting into everyone right now, and cortisol levels get messed up. So the conclusion of this study is that both insufficient sleep and circadian misalignment, meaning if you're sleeping during the day and up at night, those are stressors to the metabolic health and are associated with increased risk of obesity, diabetes, and all these other problems we're talking about. Sleeping less than 6 hours a day is associated with a 38% absolute increase in the incidence of obesity, as well as increased risk of type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, hypertension, and dyslipidemia. Sorry to beat a dead horse, but it is a dead horse if we don't sleep. Also, when we're sleep deprived, we increase our daily energy intake if we could just eat whatever we want by 250 to almost 400 calories a day. And then also increase our drive to eat excessive food, have bigger meals, snacking more often, and more likely to eat carbohydrates and fatty foods together because that helps with our hunger hormones and all that kind of stuff. And so, again, I don't want to go through too much, but night shift workers are at increased risk of cancer and all these things of just not sleeping at the right times. And stress caused by sleep loss causes stress to get worse and sleep to get worse. So we get into this cycle. You're not sleeping, you're stressed, you don't sleep, you're stressed. And then we try to break that cycle with stuff like alcohol, food, making bad life choices and things like that. And again, another study shows that if you're in a calorie restricted plan like Weight Watchers or low carb or keto or whatever you're doing, and you're sleep deprived, sleeping half the time, you are much more likely to lose muscle mass rather than fat mass. Now, if those same people sleep 8 hours a night, they're more likely to lose fat than muscle. I think most of us would prefer to lose fat over muscle. So sleep does play a huge role in this also. And even obese people without sleep apnea are fatigued during the day and have more fatigue and mood related issues. And 25% of our population reports insomnia problems, So these disturbances can be huge as far as missed work. We look at the financial cost, but also sleep deprivation causes a 50% decrease in the immune response to the influenza vaccination that we're giving to our seniors. So if you're sleep deprived, you may not get as much benefit out of a vaccine as it does if you're well rested and taking care of your metabolic health. Also, inflammatory markers are higher, and you're much more likely to get autoimmune diseases. And so they showed that, again, 10 nights of sleep deprivation cause just partial sleep deprivation, elevated CRP, which is an inflammatory marker, procoagulant, and interleukin-6, again, associated with cancer and other problems. And these things are reversed by a 2-hour nap. So we can throw that in. And again, chronic insomnia is associated, maybe not causal, but associated with increased risk of lung, colorectal, liver, breast, and prostate cancers. So circadian rhythm shift workers are more predisposed to breast, prostate, colon, and endometrial cancer, as well as non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So 40 studies have linked chronic insomnia to depression with 4 times the risk of the normal sleeping people. Tons of studies done with police officers and other people, increased cortisol, inflammatory markers, these procoagulants that I'm talking about, and stress. It definitely doesn't help that problem. So when we have both, okay, we're setting ourselves up some problems. Hyperinsulinemia, tons of studies out there showing that high insulin level is highly correlated with depression risk, and poor sleep is elevated. All these things are associated with each other, put it this way. And so, our hunger hormones go down again, depression, and get this, because it's a chicken and the egg problem, obesity increases the risk of depression by 55%. And if you have depression, it increases your risk of obesity by 58%. So these are comorbidities. These go together, and they predict each other. So diabetics are at least twice as likely to suffer from depression in general, even if they're not sleep deprived. Poorly controlled diabetics, massively increased risk of depression and anxiety, poor sleep, and all these things. Again, the vascular changes and all these kind of things are pretty amazing. And deep sleep waves, there's another study from July of 23, show that deep sleep brain waves predict sugar control. And we already see that, because when our patients are sleep deprived, we see their continuous glucose monitors, their sugars are going up, or if they're stressed. So I'll ask you, what is the most dangerous place on earth for most of us trying to get our lifestyle right? Well, most of us would say, well, it's the fast food restaurants and going out to dinner, all that, which is probably true for a lot of us. But I would say overall, the home, our house, is the most dangerous place. And why is it the house dangerous? Because we have triggers everywhere. We get into a fight with our partner. We want to eat something. We had a hard day at work. We want to come home and relax. So having stressors, triggers, things that remind us that we have food in the cabinets, all those things. We know those Snicker bars are right there in the freezer. We can go grab that. Also relaxing after a hard day. So I have a 76-year-old lady who consulted me because she had gained 30 pounds in the last year and a half. The chief culprit, the chief change in this former long-distance marathon runner, triathlete with major long-term depression, was granola. 30 pounds of weight gain, eating granola for a year and a half. So she consulted me to help to see what we can do. And whenever she gets home, her hunger signals were crazy. So after the first week, we got together on Zoom, and she said, I was going to cancel with you because I'm frustrated, I'm embarrassed, I'm humiliated, and I'm weak. And I go, why is that? She said, well, I haven't had granola for 6 days, but it happened during those 6 days. She was at a family event out of state, staying in a hotel. Never craved granola one time. She said, last night I flew home, got in the door, went straight to the cabinet, and I got out granola and ate 3 bowls of granola. She's, I'm weak. I was like, well, you went 6 days without it, and you weren't even craving it during that time, which is amazing. But your home is your comfort. That's your trigger point, and it's there. And so our body reacts. And I started thinking about it. I was like, yeah, I can fast. So I usually eat one meal a day. As soon as I get home, I'm hungry. So if I get home at noon, I'm hungry. If I get home at 4, I'm hungry. If I get home at 8, I'm hungry. I'm not hungry before that. If I'm fasting that day, I overcome that hunger cue and go, okay, I'm not eating dinner tonight. I'm gonna go do something else. And it's not even on my mind. So I've had so many people that are telling me the same thing. One of my guys lost 23 pounds while on vacation in Europe. He was out walking more and he was not snacking as much. And when he got back and he gained 8 pounds in 10 days, and then he loses 7 pounds. He went on vacation, saw his friend in Texas, stayed there, and lost 7 pounds while there for 8 days. And you go, why is that? He said, I was too embarrassed to ask my friend to go snack all the time and ask what's in the fridge, what's in the cabinet. So he said, I just wait till he ate and ate with them. So those little changes where we just kind of let down and we don't realize how much we're snacking, how much we're doing. Why is this home unsafe? According to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, 61% of men and 51% of women report at least one traumatic event in their lifetimes. Most of those events occurring at home. 20% of marriages and intimate partnerships, relationships have resorted to violence, slapping, hitting, punching, threatening violence, emotional abuse, verbal threats, screaming at people, all those things. 1 in 3 women will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. So guess what? This is a majority of us that are listening. So it does affect us all. If it doesn't affect you, it's affecting someone else around you that you know. Intimate partner violence is the single greatest cause of injury to women. We're talking about car accidents and all these other things that can happen. Like, this is a big deal. So 3.3 million children are exposed to family members committing violence against each other, against their mothers or female caretakers. Male children that witness or experience violence in their homes are 3 times more likely to become perpetrators of this. The cost of domestic violence is about $5.8 billion a year in the US alone. And that's at workplace, missing work, and all those kind of stuff. And also only 34% of people injured by their partners will seek medical help for their injuries, right? Most people aren't going to press charges. And if this is you, it's something to think about. So there's some Dr. Folletti, who I had the pleasure of talking to. I'm hoping to get him on the podcast to talk about his experience. He did something called the ACE questionnaire. And what it was is adverse childhood events. So it's 10 questions. And I'll tell you why he started doing this. He started doing this because he was noticing people lose 80 pounds on his program. He was at a major hospital and medical group here. And actually, he was here in San Diego. And he knows that people lose 80 pounds and gain back 90 pounds. He would lose 110 pounds and gain back 120 pounds. Like, what happened? How did they go from being diligent and being so first of all, they were using liquid diets, which I wouldn't agree with. But also, why did they stop? Why did they go back to their old ways? And why did they gain their weight back? The number one cause that he saw was that a female was told that she looks attractive or that she's lost weight or people have noticed. And he thought, well, that's weird, because isn't that why you're losing weight? But the problem was a majority of these women he talked to were abused as kids. So that just brought back that the extra weight was a protective mechanism. And I've talked to several of my patients in recent days, and it's been a common theme. So I was surprised by this. So these 10 questions we'll go through. One was, did a parent or adult in your household often swear at you, insult you, cuss at you, humiliate you, for wetting the bed or whatever it might be? Did they act in a way that made you feel afraid or that you might be physically hurt? That's one question. Number 2, did a parent or other adult in the household often push, grab, slap, throw, or be violent towards you? Did they ever hit you so hard that you were injured or had marks? Number 3, did an adult or person of at least 5 years older than you touch you in a sexual way? Molestation, things like that we talk about, and penetration. Number 4, did you often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special, or your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, or support each other? Next question, number 5. Did you often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, that you had dirty clothes, that you weren't the best dressed kid in the neighborhood, all those kind of things, and no one was there to protect you? Were your parents drinking, and not really paying attention to you? Were they distracted, right? Were your parents ever separated or divorced? Were any of your parents or other adult caregivers often pushed, grabbed, slapped, beaten? So were people beaten in front of you? Or were they threatened with a gun or a knife or anything like that? Did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker, alcoholic, or used street drugs? Number 9, was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or did a household member attempt suicide? Number 10, did a household member go to prison? So these seem like 10 simple questions. Significant risk as this goes higher. The higher your risk, your ACE score, the more likely you're to have chronic diseases in adulthood, including heart disease, lung cancer, diabetes, and autoimmune disease. Women with significant ACE scores were 7 times more likely to be raped as an adult. Possibly just because they put themselves in bad situations, or they weren't able to say no to people, or they felt that they deserved that. ACE scores were correlated with health outcomes. So what they did is they, instead of just looking at the obesity, the people struggling with obesity, they said, let's look at all the people in this hospital system. And what they found is that 67% of the people had at least one, and then 1 in 8 had 4 or more. I happen to have 4. So we start looking and I go, oh my gosh, this does apply to us, right? Even if we had a pretty good life, we look and go, yeah, we kind of had some trauma growing up, even though we kind of adjust for it, a lot of us, and move on and become successful in life. So if you have 4 or more, you have an increased risk of COPD and hepatitis 2.5 times the general population, or people with one or less. Depression is 4.5 times more likely. Suicidality is 12.5 times higher if you have 4 or more. If you have 7 or more, you have triple the lifetime risk of lung cancer, 3.5 times the increased risk of ischemic heart disease. 6 or more affirmative actions shortens your lifespan by 20 years if you don't address these things. With those people with 6 or more affirmative actions are 4,600 times more likely to attempt suicide. Why is this important? 2022 is the highest rate of suicide we've ever had as a nation. What does this come on the heels of? Lockdowns, stress, worries, increased drug use, increased alcohol use, terrible food intake, poor sleep, all these things. And you go, okay, maybe these things do play a role. Maybe it's just not being low carb is going to fix all these problems. And they took a population of about 17,000 people. And just so you know, this isn't just like, this is a upper middle class poll that they did. So average age was 57, 70% Caucasian, 70% were college educated in this group. So this is not just something that's happening, remotely from us. This is happening everywhere. So traumatized kids have 50 times the risk of developing asthma and autoimmune disease. And so they opened this up to 130,000 people in the general population, in their general population of this HMO insurance. And they found these are stunning numbers: 35% reduction in primary care visits and 11% reduction in ER visits. In San Diego County alone, would have saved them somewhere in the neighborhood of $35 million as a group, multi-million dollars of savings. They declined it. Why? They would save all these millions of dollars in 1 year, plus every year after that, their expenses would go down. The answer was that the doctors are not social workers and they don't want to practice being counselors. They want to practice medicine. That's a statement on our healthcare system right there. So if we can intervene. So basically what happens is when we go through these early childhood traumas, there's so many studies on this, it's overwhelming. But if you look at it, it's like your alarm system's going off all the time. So if you have a car alarm and it's going off all day and all night, and it's annoying all your friends and neighbors and all that, that's where set too sensitive. And so people are stressed all the time and tense and worried. Other people say, yeah, that's my false alarm, I'm not going to worry about it. But other people, their heart rate, their blood pressure, everything goes high every time they hear this car alarm going off, especially the rest of us at 2 a.m. when it's going off. But some of us respond by being more like a possum. We just shut down, disengage, don't connect. We, like women who've been raped very often will have, they won't connect, they don't enjoy sexual intercourse with their partners and things like that. Because they're more of the possum. They just go into survival mode, because your body, just like when people are critically ill in the hospital, a lot of times they don't remember what happened, or if you're in a major car accident, you don't remember it afterwards. Legitimately, your brain washes away to protect you. The rest of us may become like gazelles, and we're freaked out all the time. We're looking all the time, worried everyone's trying to get us, and we can't relax because everyone's trying to get us, and we can't, we're at danger all the time. Other people who may have a score of 0 or 1, they might be like lions. They walk around, they go, okay, I'm not going to worry about everything. Nothing's going to hurt me and nothing's going to attack me. I'm pretty safe in general. So it's a lot of this is our perspective on life. So looking at the effects of stress, which is tightly controlled, tightly tied to sleep and anxiety and all these things. So stress, 80% of office visits are estimated to be stress related, whether it's headaches, back pain, heartburn, stomach problems, constipation, whatever it is. 80% of patients with autoimmune illnesses, which we're seeing a huge epidemic of, had a significant stressor within weeks of onset of symptoms. Is it a coincidence that we are at increased risk? The most likely time to have a heart attack is Monday morning. And I've looked at this. This is real data. Monday morning heading to work, why you're stressed. You probably you're drinking on the weekend, stressed out. You got all these things you're thinking about. You have to deal with your coworkers, whatever you got. You can't go relax anymore. Increased risk of heart attack Monday morning and strokes also. And also during the holidays, people are more likely to have heart attacks between Christmas and New Year's. Think about you're with stressful family members who might have voted different than you. They may have a different opinion on vaccines than you have. You may have, discussions about, sports teams, whatever. Plus you're running around. You have all these extra things you got to take care of. You have to go shopping. You have to make sure everyone's happy, and all these things increase our risk. Plus it's wintertime and people are out shoveling snow and doing other stuff they normally wouldn't do. So stress is the elephant in the room. And there was another study, it's called Work Stress and the Risk of Cancer, a meta-analysis of observational studies. In conclusion, our meta-analysis shows that work stress is an important risk factor for lung cancer, colorectal cancer, esophageal cancer, and overall cancer risk when you factor out smoking and all these other risk factors that will increase our risk of cancers. So it's pretty devastating. And I've seen in my practice where it's hard for people who are under chronic stress. There's studies done with dogs where if you keep shocking the dog, they'll jump to the other side of the cage. But if you start shocking them indiscriminately and they can't escape the shock, they'll just lay down and take it. They become like the possum. And so even when they open the door to let the dog out, the dog would just lay there and take the shots. So the shocks. Once someone got them out a few times and let them know that they can get out, then the dogs would escape the shock. But so many of us have just laid down and said, okay, I can't escape it. I'm too stressed out. I'm too worried. I can't do anything about it. And you think about the race car driver, and this is why I attribute, Jason Fung and Ben Bickman and Rob Sivas with really saving my life in a way where I was like an IndyCar driver with my foot on the accelerator all the time. If I let off the gas, I'd fall behind. So I was always on. When you're taking turns in life, you got to slow off the gas. Sometimes you have to step on the brake. Sometimes you got to stop. Sometimes you got to pull into the pit stop and get your tires changed, right? So many of us are just on overdrive all the time. And when we look at that from a standpoint of, responsibility, and we start losing social connection, and we are in an epidemic of lost social connection. We just went through a period of not seeing people's smiles and faces, or got a hug, or got to spend time at the holidays with our family, right? There's huge ramifications of this. And I don't want to be political, but I'm just telling you there are. From a medical perspective, again, we have the highest suicide rate we've ever had. Our drug overdose is one of the leading cause of death in our population right now. So looking at continuous glucose monitor, I'm telling you, I have a lady, I wish everyone could see these things. Hopefully you watch it online a little bit, but nurse that I take care of, she's reversed her diabetes. Her sugars run around 70 to 100. I'm showing the tracings online. Here she is the next day. Her sugars are almost double what they typically are. And especially from 3 to 430 or so, her sugars are off the chart high. And then after that, it drops down straight down below baseline. What was the difference? When her sugars went crazy, she was giving a talk to a bunch of doctors on a topic she wasn't very comfortable with. And she was afraid of the question and answer. That's how I feel when Rob Sivas comes up to ask me questions after my talk. I probably get the same sugar response. But once the questions were over and everything was done, her sugars the next day were lower than before, right? But of note, she did not eat anything that day because she was so stressed about this talk, but her sugars were double normal. So you're going to tell me it's sugar intake that was the whole problem? No, stress plays a role. Another guy of mine, super stressful life, takes a week off, eats terrible food all week, and his net loss was 8.8 pounds he lost, even though he ate terrible food, but he was not stressed. He was laughing, having fun, goofing around. So it's okay. I think the take home message is we got to relax sometimes and kind of enjoy life and not be too stressed. But also, again, one of my patients, I'm looking at her tracing right now, her sugars go from, the lower end of her range to the higher end of her range. And her note says stress, thinking about relationship problems, right? Sugars go straight up. The next week, she puts on your 1 hour massage. Boom, her sugars drop the same amount going the other way down during the massage. human contact, relaxation, not stressing, not worrying about paying the bills and the kids and all these other things. So all this, a lot of this has to do with this oxytocin shift, right? If you're not sleeping well, oxytocin goes down. If you're connecting, having fun, laughing, I think this is what Roseto was doing. They had high cholesterol, but they weren't dying of heart attacks. Why? They were bonding. They were going bowling together. They were going fishing together. They were laughing. They were saying, "Does this seem like a crazy rule to you?" Yeah, but when we're isolated, we can't do those things. So it does put us at increased risk. And again, the higher our cortisol, the more likely we are to store visceral fat, which in turn does increase inflammatory markers, all these cancer markers, all these markers I keep saying over and over. It's just redundant because it's the same effect. And while I was looking at this, I want to give a shout out to, there's a lot to with gut microbiome getting messed up. There are some studies showing that drinking apple cider vinegar and water helps to improve insulin sensitivity. Also, there's a study with college students where they lowered their depression rate by 34%. Even more impressive, they did a study with college students and they added to their load by saying, okay, 5 minutes a day, you have to count your blessings. You have to either, write about what you want to do, what was good about your childhood, what are you enjoying in school, what do you want to do during your summer break, all those kind of things. 5 minutes a day, and they had to journal it. At the end of the study, they had a 38% decrease depression rate. Their anxiety numbers are better. So you start looking at this and go, okay, maybe we got to slow down a little bit. Maybe we got to listen to Bob Marley sometime on the weekend, or listen to a podcast that doesn't stress us out, or come to terms with these things that we're dealing with, life stresses and all that. So I'm just thumbing through my talk here. Again, oxytocin is a big deal. Exercise, huge role in stress reduction, huge role in improving sleep, huge role in decreasing the stress hormones and the cancer causing hormones. But when we're stressed, what's the first thing to go? Exercise. Second thing to go, sleep. And then we go, okay, why am I gaining weight? Why do I feel miserable? Why am I bitter at the world? Well, exercise helps all these things. Exercise helps raise the feel-good chemicals. And it's not about the calories we're burning when we're exercising. It's the effect on the physiology of our body. Again, here's another study. Lower skeletal muscle mass is associated with increased diabetes and insulin resistance. So if we're trying to keep our insulin down, one thing we can do is put up on muscle. What does muscle do? It's very insulin sensitive. So when you're insulin sensitive, you do a lot better. Just studies showing like people with more muscle mass have lower visceral fat than people with lower muscle mass. So people can be thin and metabolically sick. We see it every day in clinic. Very, very common. Does mindset matter? I'll leave you with this. I think we have about 6,200 to 40,000 thoughts a day. Probably us guys have on the lower end, I would imagine. 85% of those thoughts are negative on average. 95% of those thoughts recur daily. So this is a huge deal for us. And these, going back to these early childhood events, why does it affect us so much, other than being on overdrive and stress overload and all these things? I have a patient who's actually a counselor who has helped a lot of people. And she's had a lot of family stress and grew up in a really horrible environment. So she starts losing weight and her sugar starts getting better. So I talked to her and I said, what do you attribute that to? Like, you've been doing all the right stuff all this time. And she said, you know what, doc? I stopped looking in the mirror. I go, what does it have to do with it? She said, well, whenever I look at the mirror, all I do is see my flaws. I've gained weight. I have wrinkles under my eyes. My hair is gray. I'm not young anymore. You're not as pretty as your sister. I was like, wow, that's really harsh. She goes, yeah, I was hearing my mom's voice all the time when I looked in the mirror. Every time because when she was young, that's exactly what happened. So the next time I see her, she's doing even better. I said, what happened? And she said, I'm looking in the mirror again. And I said, I thought that was traumatic for you. And she said, I realized I'm not my mother. And I started giving myself positive and say, wow, you lost weight. Wow, you look great in that outfit. Wow, everything was positive. And she's doing better because that positive reinforcement probably is lowering her stress hormones, her cortisol levels, and raising her oxytocin levels. When you can look at yourself and be happy and go, okay, we're not where we want to be yet. I mean, I think we can all work on that, but I'm going to keep moving forward. Because for a lot of us, for me, I just look at the scale and I get stressed. I remember in high school wrestling thinking, oh my gosh, I got to see that little thing move down a little bit. If it doesn't, I'm going to have to go run and spit and do crazy stuff. They don't allow them to do that anymore, by the way, because it was causing eating disorders. But, just seeing that scale, people will stress out like, no, I don't want to see the scale. Camera comes out, people hide. Like, I don't want to be seen. So, there's so much of this mindset stuff. And one of my patients on mindset, she started out at 265 pounds. She had never been below 180 pounds in her adult life, and her goal weight was to reach 175 pounds. And life has been stressful for her. She's been a little dysthymic. Her life's not where she wants it to be, going through a divorce and having all these kind of things happen in life. So I asked her, hey, let's start out on a positive note. What's the best thing that happened to you this week? In the last week since I saw you, what's the best thing? And she thought about it for a little bit and kind of like thought. And she goes, you know what? Last Wednesday, my friend came and we played games and we had a good time and we laughed and we had fun. And I was like, okay, great. You had a good week. Okay. So we're talking about other stuff. And I was like, oh, by the way, what's your weight at? She goes, oh, I'm 173 and a half. I was like, holy cow, your goal was 180 and your dream was 175 and you're 173 and a half. You broke that. Aren't you? That's not the highlight of your week. And her response was, no, that stresses me out more than ever. She said, I know I won't be able to maintain it and I'll gain all my weight back now that I reached my goal. And I was like, wow, that is not a very good attitude. Like a lot of people, once they get to 173, they want to get to see if they can see a 6 on that scale. And so I was a little disheartened for her and I felt bad for her. And I just saw her the other day and she is under 168 right now, right? Because she said, you know what? I was thinking about it. If I can get to this, why can't I go to the next level? So you just believe. So she did a 3-day fast and she dropped her weight down to the 160. She's at her goal weight. Everything's good. She doesn't need to lose more weight, but she wanted to see if she could do it. So that's the kind of thing is this oh gosh, I'm forgetting his first name, but his last name is Bannister. In 1954, he broke the 4-minute mile. It was told that it can never happen. It was impossible, physiologically impossible. So he didn't even get a medal in the Olympics 2 years before that, I believe. And he breaks the 4-minute miles, gets like 3.996 or something crazy like that, breaks it, and everyone's amazed. Like he's amazing. He held the record for 46 days because people started realizing it. Then all of a sudden that record got broken quicker. And so you start realizing once people realize it can be done, they can do it. Once people realize they can come off insulin or they can come off their blood pressure medicine or that they can hopefully get off their antidepressants with changing their lifestyle, getting enough sleep, connecting with other people, it's a huge deal. It's the same thing, mindset. No one could beat Mike Tyson, but once he got knocked out, his career was over and that was it. And I'm going to stop my share there with you, but all these things play a role. So to say, I'll just do low carb and I'm not going to address the stuff that happened when I was a kid or my marriage problems or my workouts, there's way more to it. These 5 things. That's why I love Ben Bickman. That's why I'm glad that Health Code sponsors this podcast, is because he gets the whole picture of life of what matters, what's important. Keeping the stress levels low, getting sleep, getting your rest, connecting with other people. The lesson of Roseto, I think we all need to listen to that. Social media is not going to do it for us, right? Fighting with people on social media and picking on them and saying you're eating the wrong stuff. There's studies showing with this oxytocin and the stress hormones that if, for instance, they took mice and they would put them in 2 different cages and they would put a divider between them. One mouse determined when they exercise. So when the mouse felt like exercising, it would exercise. The other mouse feels like watching the news or reading the paper or doing something, but the other mouse, when it runs, this one has to run. The one who was forced to run had poor response as far as stress hormones, cortisol, insulin, all this stuff, because it didn't want to do it. Now, if you're doing volunteer work and helping at church and you're doing all these things and you don't really want to do it and you really don't care about the people you're helping, probably not going to have as much of a physiologic effect as what we're seeing is that people who really want to help that neighbor down the street, or you say, hey, someone's in need. That's what they did in Roseto. And that's probably what part of this benefit was. So many of these studies that you look at and go, wow, this is pretty wild stuff, because it sounds so hocus pocus and weird, but human connection is critical. And Dom DeAgostino, one of the most respected researchers out there, he was the editor on this paper that was talking about the association with depression, anxiety, mood stuff, and loneliness. Loneliness is like smoking 2 packs a day when we look at lifespan and risk of cancers and all that kind of stuff. So what do we do to our seniors? We lock them up. We didn't let them see other people. No facial expression, no hugs, no pat on the back, no good job. And they declined mentally, physically, spiritually. Everything got worse. And they ate terrible food and they watched the news and they thought they would die if they breathed the air outside. And so it's inhumane. Like our prisoners, our worst prisoners, murderers, they have to be 1 hour out of the sun, 1 hour out of their cell, even if they're on solitary for killing everyone in the prison. So you start looking and saying, wow, we treated some people worse than we did our worst prisoners for their own good, right? So There's so many studies on these things that of the importance of facial contact or seeing someone smile or making someone laugh. Tons of studies on laughter, by the way, that laughter increases nitric oxide levels, it dilates the blood vessels, it has a parasympathetic response, meaning it slows the heart rate down. Here's another one I'll throw at you, another study I just read. They took people that were in a job and they put them in one group where they had to they were with a bunch of people who were saying, you're too slow, you're holding us back, you're the worst worker ever, all this stuff, even though they're doing the same thing. And then they would put them in a different group where everyone said, oh my gosh, you're super helpful, if we didn't have you, we couldn't get this job done. And they were encouraging and nice and all that stuff. The person's heart rate got better, their blood pressure came down, their stress hormones, their heart rate variability, all these things got better when they're around decent, nice people. The point is, for all of us, first of all, we could break these cycles. If you had a bad childhood, you can do that. If you've been a jerk your whole life, you can make up for that, right? I believe in redemption. That's why I love grace and forgiveness and all these things, because if we do those things, even though if you're not a religious person, you benefit. One of my patients just the other day, we were talking and I was talking about these things with her, and she says, oh my gosh, I just got diabetes. I was lucky. My brother and sister, they never forgave. She goes, I forgave my parents and moved on. I realized they had poor tools. And like, she put it in perspective. She said, they're morbidly obese, cancers. That she goes through the whole list of all their problems they have and how they have no relationship with their kids and they're miserable. And it's like, oh my gosh, like that resentment and bitterness. I mean, we all have some of that, but you go, man, if I can deal with it, it makes my health better. So I would be willing to bet in those groups where they had the people that were either mean or nice to the people. I bet the people who were either being mean to the person, they probably did worse from a cortisol, stress hormone, and all those things levels than the people who are kind and decent. So we have tons of data on this, and we see outcomes in places like Roseto, and you go, okay, am I nice to my neighbors? Am I kind? Am I decent? Right? And I just recently had an experience. I have a place in Arizona, and I'm there working in the garage and people stop by and they pull in the driveway. Hey, can I help you with anything? Do you need a ladder? What do you need? I'm your neighbor next door. I'm your neighbor on this other side. I was like, wow, everyone's super nice. I mean, having neighbors like that rather than someone complaining about, hey, why do you keep your garage door open all day or whatever, those kind of things. So I think these positive things they do matter. And on our road to weight loss or metabolic health, the biggest thing we do is support each other and be kind and decent and not yell at someone when they mess up. There's plenty of people out there to criticize you, and if you're someone who criticizes yourself, then it's starting to look at it and go, okay, what can I do to make myself better? There's a great quote by Mark Twain that basically is saying, look, don't sit around and stress about all the stuff you can't do. If you can do something, get up and do anything, whatever you can do to make that situation better. If it's out of your control, don't worry about it. And he says, all the greatest catastrophes in my life never happened. Because you think about all these things that we worried about and stress about, and you worry about, if there's going to be an earthquake one day, there's nothing you can do about that. You can make the best of it and go, okay, I'll prepare an emergency kit and I'll have it there in case I need it. And if I never need it, I'll change it every once in a while and replace it and be glad that I never needed it. So I think a lot of this stuff we can really, it's beneficial if you start having a positive attitude and positive outlooks. So two people doing the same job, one can be miserable. As a doctor, that's one thing I had to look at and go, am I going to get burned out if I'm not helping people anymore? Yeah, I'm not doing this job. I'll find something else where I can help people and really enjoy what I'm doing. So right now, people ask me, hey, are you going to retire? I was like, I have no desire because I love what I do. I get rewarded. I get my oxytocin boosted, right? When I'm in Guatemala helping people, I get my oxytocin boosted. So we all need to be on oxy, but not oxycontin, right? We need to be on oxy, the different oxy that's going to help us. So yeah, it does make a difference if you're stressed, intense, and worried. Even if you're an overachiever and you're working and you're the best employee and all these things, but you're lacking your family. And think about it. I think about it just how we treat people around us. I think we all know when we're grumpy, stressed, tense, we're not on our best behavior. We're not going to be like compassionate to people. But when you go, I'm well rested, I'm taken care of, I'm doing the right stuff, I'm on track, we have a lot more grace for each other, and so some of the greatest doctors I've talked to, when they got on a better health journey, they were amazed by how nice people were to them. But like the mirror, going back to the mirror, if you smile at someone, they're way more likely to smile back to you. If you ignore them and walk by with your head down, someone in Arizona was telling me, like, do California people think they drop $100 bills from airplanes and helicopters because they're all looking for them? They won't look at me in the eye and they just walk by and ignore me like they're looking for $100 bill on the ground. But amazingly, when you're kind to other people and nice to them, they're kind and nice back to you. I'll leave you with this. This is what my pastor friend of mine told me. He said that The chief of the village is sitting out in front of the village, and a guy walks up, and the chief says, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Well, I'm looking for a new place to stay." And the chief said, "Where do you come from?" He said, "Well, where I come from, everyone was miserable. I fought with everyone. They picked on me all the time. They didn't treat me right. I was so glad to get out of there, and now I need a new place to live." He said, "What are the people like here?" And the chief says, "You're going to find those same people here in our town." And so the guy picks up his bags and walks away. And a few hours later, another guy walks up with his bags, and he says, "Hey, what's your town like?" And the chief says, "Well, where did you come from?" He said, "Well, where I came from, I was so sad to leave. I loved all the people. I loved my neighbors. They were so kind. And we had such a great time together all the time. And they took care of me and I took care of them. And it was just time for me to leave. And we all cried and hugged each other. And I left. And, it was hard to move to a new town because I loved them so much." And he says, "Well, welcome. You're going to find the same people here." Right. So a lot of that is what our attitude. And I have patients who get hospitalized who have a bad attitude and they go, "All the nurses are mean." Other people in the same hospital with the same nurses say, "Gosh, the nurses were so great when I was in there. They were so kind. I hated to leave," that kind of stuff. So I think there's a lot of lessons we can learn from Roseto and from stress and sleep and all those things. And really, like what Rob Sivas did and Jason Fung, and they said, reassess what you think, Brian. Like basically reassess, is it worth it? It wasn't worth it working 18-hour days and being stressed and like not having time for my wife and kids because I had to get my notes ready for the next day or prepare charts or run around like a crazy person all the time or skip family events because I had to go work. So really reassess. That's what I'm getting at. And yes, despite popular notions, lack of sleep, stress, tension, not getting along with others, that will affect our metabolic health just as much as eating cookies will. So think about these things. And again, I want to thank my sponsors, Health Code. They're doing great work. Ben Bickman, his brother, love those guys. Keto Mojo, right? They went through life trauma and they just bounced back. They went through stuff and they invested everything to help other people. And I know their motivations, and that's why they sponsor this podcast. And so go buy their stuff, support them, and just thank you for for listening. And I think please share this with people. We as a society, we can't be isolated and hate each other because you voted for someone. We're not going to agree on everything. So you go, what do we have in common? What are the good things? What do I see good in this person that I might not politically or religiously or whatever agree with? And let's make the best of it, because we all need each other, even if we consider each other traffic or vectors or whatever we do. If we get out of that mindset and we realize we're all human beings with hurts and pains and desires, and we do want to make the best of life for the most part. There's some bad apples out there for sure, but if we can help, let's do that. It will help you. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others. Thanks for listening. Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information. And hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.